everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour. Every week, photographers meet here to connect, inspire, and create. You'll find the schedule for upcoming sessions on my website at lindanickell.com, as well as the links to previous sessions posted to the Happiness Hour YouTube channel. My guests share their photography tips and insight into their creative journeys, and they inspire us to look at a subject just a little differently. Today is the 23rd anniversary of the tragic events that occurred on September 11th, 2001, and it's permanently etched in our country's history. As travelers and photographers, many of us have visited the 9/11 memorials, and as Americans, we vowed to never forget. In tonight's session, 9/11, a photographic tribute, Valerie Hoffman will share photographs of these moving memorials and places of remembrance. If you're on Instagram, give her a follow at Valerie Hoffman Photography, and you can connect with her and sign up for her newsletter through her website, valeriehoffmanphotography.com. Welcome back to the Happiness Hour, Valerie.
Thanks so much, Linda.
All right. Okay, so this one is going to be a little bit different. Okay, let's just start with, wasn't sure if we should meet up or not tonight, but after a conversation with you, I just felt like if anybody can make this evening special and respectful, it would be you. And I had the pleasure of hanging out with you like on the 20th anniversary. You and me and Christy from New Jersey, and Brian's in here too. There were a few of us.
Yeah.
We all gathered, and we were able to photograph the tribute of light that is your background photo. So with that, I'm going to just kind of like hand over the video, the mic to you, and let you run with it. So you're if you want to say anything, you're welcome to do that. If you just want to jump into your presentation, that's okay too.
I don't share a lot of personal things like throughout this. I just have kind of the pictures, but I obviously remember where I was. I was a district manager in Michigan, district manager for Ritz Cameras, and was driving to do interviews in Battle Creek. And I was doing my first interview like at 9 o'clock, and I had heard on the drive about the attacks, but you just didn't know, and you try and go about your day. But pretty soon after we started, sirens went off everywhere, and they announced they were closing the mall because there's a huge military base right near the mall, and nobody was sure, as the young lady said that was in the plane. So, then I went home and watched like everyone else did, on the news for days and weeks and months of what was happening. And it's just really heartbreaking. So it took a long time till I actually got to one of the memorials, and that was I could tell that funny story real quick with Christy. We couldn't even remember why, but we were planning on getting together that weekend. I was going to New Jersey the year before you, Linda, so for the 19th anniversary or whatever. And I just happened to say, oh yeah, it's 9/11. I said, have you ever been to the Tribute in Lights? And she's like, no, but Dan and I, her husband, have always wanted to go. And I said, me too. And she's like, whichever one of us was the dumb one that said, do you want to go? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And so to avoid two cars, because this would have been a triangle, like we're nowhere near each other, and in New York, I drove 2.5 hours to her house, and then we drove, I think it's 2.5 hours north to be part of this. And it was pretty phenomenal. So I, pretty good variety from 2 years in the New York area, and then a bunch of other memorials. So that's kind of how I ended up there. So I've been to several places, and as we get into this, now it's not turning. I don't know if I appear, very patriotic or not, but I really am very moved by these type of things. So I may struggle here and there if I can get my screen to go. All right. Well, let's just start. Maybe clicking is going to work. So the very first place that I was the National September 11th Memorial, which obviously is in New York City. And I was just in New York with some friends on Black Friday, but we did go to the World Trade Center, and I got to see the reflecting pools, which are not exactly in the place where the towers were, um, but are very close by. And here in the background, you see the new One World Trade Center, if anyone's not seen that. So this memorial is part of the whole World Center Trade Center complex, and it obviously was created not only for remembering the September 11th attacks, but also, like, I'd forgotten about the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, and 6 people were killed then. So all of these memorials really pay tribute for both times, since they were both terrorist attacks there. So the memorial is located right at the World Trade Center site, the former location of the Twin Towers that were both destroyed. And I'm a little more detailed because maybe some people don't know the whole story that might be younger. Um, I had no way of remembering all the details about some of these memorials, so I kind of put them together for you guys. But this memorial was dedicated in 2014 in May, and there's a ton. This is the inside, which I have not been able to visit yet, but 40,000 images, 14,000 artifacts. It's huge, and it's an awesome place to actually visit for the full, story of what really happened there. But from the part that I saw, the names of the 2,983 victims, they're inscribed on 152 bronze little parapets around the memorial pools. And they're arranged, I found this, I just learned this, according to meaningful adjacencies, as they called it. So based on relationships or where they worked or what time, whatever, and where, the Pentagon, pardon the typo there, or the World Trade Center. So, and even the family members had some input on it. So the names of each victims from each tower are in the 2 separate pools. So they're kind of separated. So everything is so huge in New York and the skyscrapers that I used a fisheye for most things to try and get the reflecting pools below along with the World Trade Center. So as you can see, there are 4 sides to this memorial, and there are names carved throughout, and there's some light. And what's neat, so we were here kind of around dusk, and you can see deep down into the reflecting pool, and you can see all the crowds that are gathered around. And again, this is Black Friday, it's not September 11th, but it's always crowded there. And here's kind of a view of some of the names, and they're kind of backlit. What's really neat, and I think moving, is randomly there by names, there'll be roses stuck in by the names, or a flag, or even like notes to the people that passed, or people just, as they do with other memorials, with their hand on them, kind of trying to still connect to the ones they lost. Here's a close-up of the beautiful new One World. Some people don't like it, but this is the newer building, the One World Trade Center. And I loved the patterns and the texture. And I remember photographing this as an abstract. But now when I was preparing for this presentation, looking at those windows, just the one picture that affected me the most when we were seeing everything on TV was people actually jumping out of the windows, that it was so bad. And so that just really was a good reminder of, what went on that day. Looking across the reflecting pool is this strange white building back here is called the Oculus, and that's the transportation hub in the World Trade Center district. And it's supposed to look like a dove, and it's a pretty cool architectural element. So after we spent time at the memorial, we kind of went across the street, and I tried to get some other pictures incorporating that with One World. And it was, I don't know if, I think the colors change. I don't know if, it was just blue that night, but it was pretty crazy looking. And we did go inside. So if you've never been there, here's a view inside. Again, it was Christmas. You had to walk past an armed guard right here at the top. So it was well protected even back then. And then because I love architecture so much and I love ceilings, and I have this thing about laying on the floor, I did that with no shame in front of thousands of people, just went dead center, and looking up with that fisheye lens to be able to get all that detail. And then one last, it was dark when we came outside, and you can kind of get I think it was just neat, all the lights and colors. So now let's talk about the Tribune Light, which is the thing that is probably one of the biggest memorials for the 9/11 attacks. And we're going to start at Liberty State Park, which is directly across the Hudson River from Lower Manhattan. So here's a panoramic view. When Christy and I first went, we started at the southern tip of the park. The park, Liberty State Park, is about a mile long. And so we started at the southern point, and this was kind of our view from there. From there, you can see the Statue of Liberty, although it's the backside. But here's some of the details. The whole park is a great place for views of Lower Manhattan. And then there's also the Empty Sky Memorial, which you'll see shortly. So up from the northern view, this is your view of the city. So it's great all day long. You can watch all the cruise lines come and go. Here you have One World. By daylight, there are always helicopters flying. And then here's the view from that northern point. And this is where we met for the workshop. And this is where I would recommend if you're going to come to just start here at dusk, because it's, I think, the best views. Right aside is an old train station as well. But here's just some of the views from the park as we head into dusk. But so if you're visiting, you've never been, there's a lot to see here. The train station's abandoned. You can't walk in here, but it's pretty neat to photograph through a fence. Just going really quick there and back there. So here also is a view with Ellis Island in the foreground. Okay, so now as we're coming into dusk, and the Tribune Lights generally only takes place, this is also a view of the walkway that goes all the way up, one night, September 11th, so from dusk then to dawn on the 12th. And here's a view. When Christy and I went, there were a lot of clouds, and so it looked like the bat signal over the city. We weren't overly thrilled with the clouds, but it was kind of neat. In the right here, you can see the abandoned pier too. Maybe it's not officially abandoned. This is where you get the ferry to the Statue of Liberty. But that's part of your view. And if you look all the way over here, so this was a panorama image. Here's the the Empire State Building over here. So here we are on September 11th. And it's, you can see there's pretty good crowds there, flags at half mast. And you might be able to see birds, like a lot of birds kind of get caught in the lights there. And occasionally they'll have to turn off the beams to get the birds to kind of move along. But it's definitely beautiful. I definitely bring a tripod, long exposures. You can see how the water's thinned out there. Your best views are, at Blue Hour. This view gives you, I meant to look it up and I don't remember how many, but it's like, the giant beams that advertise things. There are two different sets, and I think there's like at least 80 beams that make up these two that you see. So even though it looks like two, there are a ton of lights making up these towers. Here's our group. That's okay, Linda, right? So this was the workshop then that second year. And you get an idea of how close you are and the view that you can get. So right at that same spot where we're standing is also the Empty Sky Memorial, and that's New Jersey's memorial to the victims of the September 11th attack. Again, it's in the park, and it was dedicated on September 10th, 2011, so right before the 10th anniversary of the attacks. It also is very crowded. What you see in the foreground are two of the beams from the World Trade Center. It's very hard to get any pictures without anyone. And I don't believe you can be in there overnight, although some pictures I've seen might suggest otherwise. But this was dedicated to the 746 New Jerseyans that were killed in both of the two terrorist attacks. The twin walls, they are transecting, they're gently sloped mound anchored by granite path, which is beautiful, and it's directed towards ground zero. They're 30-foot high rectangular towers. They stretch 208 feet and 10 inches long, which is the exact width of the World Trade Center. And the proportion of the walls is a symbolic representation of the buildings as if they were lying on their sides. So if you read about a lot of the memorials, it's just really neat the thought that had gone into them with the details. So here's a shot during the day. It's beautiful, reflective. You can get a view of one world. Again, here's where some people place roses either on the ground or up by someone's name. And then the name of the memorial, I just learned this too, was taken from the Springsteen song Empty Sky, which is about the empty sky where the towers stood. And Bruce is a native of New Jersey. So here's some views by day. And then a little memorial plaque. And you can see as the sunset is starting to glow, it reflects off the metal here, and you can get some really beautiful reflections. And it almost looks like a ring of fire. If you look at the bottom, you can see all the heads. So I'm trying to avoid some of that to get a close up here. And then now with AI technology, I was able to remove some of the people to get a little bit of a cleaner view here. But this is really probably what you'll see. Here's your views again. I just feel like I'm going backwards. So some details about the Tribune Light. It was first presented in 2002 while rescue and recovery efforts at Ground Zero had continued, so 6 months after 9/11. The twin beam of light is meant to evoke the original Twin Towers and has become a regular symbol for New Yorkers, how they remember the city's resilience after the attacks. And a couple years ago, they actually were not going to do it, whether they didn't have the funds or something, and people went nuts over that. So it has continued for all these years. And amazingly, these beams can be seen from a 60-mile radius from Lower Manhattan. And like I said, they do test the beams like the week prior. And we had no idea when like Linda and Christy and I were there on the 10th that the lights would be on. We were just there to shoot sunset. But as it got dark, we suddenly saw really faintly in the camera that they were lit up the night before as well. And I think that was a Friday night, right? So maybe because it was a weekend, they were giving people a little extra love. So it's a couple different shots. Here's kind of a view of the camera. All right. So now this was a funny thing. So Christy, my friend Pam, Linda, we all have seen the shot. We wanted it desperately, but no one wanted to go into New York City. And my friend Pam said, I'll drive into New York City. So, all right. So we were out photographing. You'll see a couple of the other memorials. We were out till 1:30 in the morning. We got back to the hotel. Pam's the first one. She and I were rooming together. And she's like, all right, what time do we have to get up? And I said, we have to be downstairs at 4:15. And she's like, it's 1:20. I'm like, yes, it is. So we pretty much didn't sleep that whole weekend. When it was all done, I had to stay at the hotel and sleep a couple hours to drive home. But this was a bucket list shot. We went over, unfortunately, you couldn't park. The meters weren't active until 6 a.m. So it was already getting light. So we didn't have as much time to get any great pictures. But this is Pier 1. It's the most famous, view from Brooklyn. And here's just a couple really quick views from there. And I really had to kind of work to try and bring out those beams. They really were pretty faint. Linda, I didn't include the picture where you're teaching the Jewish guys how to take pictures. And this was it. As the light came up, then it was kind of game over, and we, moved on to photographing other things. Where we were late the night before was at a different memorial, and that was called, it's mainly called the Teardrop Memorial, but it's officially titled To the Struggle Against World Terrorism. And then I just saw that it's also called the Tear of Grief. And that's located in Bayonne, New Jersey, which might be maybe 10 miles from Liberty State Park. It probably takes about 20 minutes to get there. And this is a 10-story sculpture by whoever this person is that was given to the US as an official gift from the Russian government. And it was as a memorial to obviously the victims in both of the bombings. So that's kind of fascinating. And you should look this up. There's quite there was a big debate and argument about where this thing should go. And I'll show you where it actually is. But it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So the groundbreaking for this occurred in 2005, and Vladimir Putin was there. The monument was officially dedicated on September 11th in 2006, and it comprises a 100-foot bronze-clad tower with a jagged opening in the middle, which hangs the 40-foot nickel surface teardrop. And then around the bottom, there are 11 sides. And that's at the base. It has names on there etched of everyone who died on September 11th and the first World Trade Center bombing. And of note is that there were several Russians working in the World Trade Center that lost their life. So, whenever I go somewhere, I try and get as many views as I can. Now, we went back there at night and it's lit up beautifully. When Christy and I went, I had no idea that there was going to be a separate tribute of lights over top of this memorial, which is a really cool surprise. So it was kind of hard to get them lined up if you were standing in front so you could see the teardrop. So again, a super wide angle lens was kind of necessary. Here you can see all the names around the bottom. And this is one of my first and maybe only successful vertical panoramas. So this was like 11 horizontal shots because it's so tall, stitched together in Lightroom. But so it's a beautiful memorial to visit day and night. You got the bat signal. And then this is your daytime view from down there. And again, you can see the Statue of Liberty there. To the left, where you see kind of this road, this is like a very industrial area. It's just a very strange place to have placed this, but that was part of the problem or debate. And it's where container ships come in and everything. So this is your view as you pass, trying to get to or around the memorial. And here's a panoramic view from down there at night, where you can see, I don't know, Christie Manhattan Bridge, Brooklyn Bridge. I don't know my bridges, but it's a pretty cool view. And then what I love most about this view is now you have the Statue of Liberty in there, and you have the Empire State Building also kind of in closer proximity. So it's a great view. It's hard because there's a high fence and you kind of need to be tall and a 400 to 600 millimeter lens to get this perspective. But it's cool. And again, this was for the 20th anniversary. So for that event, there were a ton of buildings that were lit in blue that aren't lit that way annually. And then the other memorial that we visited while we were there with Linda, another sunrise event, was in Weehawken, and it's officially called the Hudson Riverfront 9/11 Memorial. And it contains these two pieces of the World Trade Center. And what's really cool is it commemorates the 9/11 boat lift. That's the official name, which was the emergency rescue response. And it commemorates those who perished, the 5 Weehawken residents that perished. And I don't know if you remember in the news, there's the thousands of people that were being transported back and forth by boats. And it was official vehicles, police, and fire, but it was anybody in New York that had a boat was going and trying to help rescue people from the island. So they put this near the Weehawken Port Imperial, which was approximately 60,000 people were brought there, which is huge. And triage was quickly set up there to to aid those that were injured. This was dedicated 10 years after the September 11th attacks. So the memorial includes 2 trident-shaped beams that were recovered from the World Trade Center, and they're set vertically into an infinity pool and a fountain commemorating and a plaque, sorry. The beams stand 30 feet tall. At the top, they're 8 feet wide, and they weigh 50,000 pounds each. They serve as a visual reference to the parts of the building that withheld and outlasted the damage. So probably a lot of you can picture the different pictures where you saw them still standing when everything else was rubble. And the seating there in the park orients towards the site of the former buildings. So this was our sunrise view. And you can see One World. I moved around so I could get that in the center. And then some more views as the sun came up. So those tridents are the trees. So there's actually a memorial for them that's here in Pennsylvania. Um, they were referred, I guess, with World Trade Center lingo as the tridents, but at the steel mill where they were created, they called them the trees. So they were formed by Lucan Steel Company, which is in Coatesville, and it's currently abandoned. After the attacks, several sections of the towers, they remained standing, and they were eventually dismantled and stored in a hangar at the JFK airport, along with all the other artifacts. The beams had to be cut in lengths of 30 feet to be able to fit on trucks to be transported. This is the outside of Lucan Steel, which is now a National Iron and Steel Museum. And they're working, it's just a small thing, but they're hoping to open up big displays. But you can get an idea of how big they are. So I had the opportunity to go on a workshop that was being done here inside Lucan Steel, since I like to photograph abandoned things. And so here you could see, I believe they had 11 of these trees, and they're in their pieces all along the ground here. And they were so high, I mean, they came up above my waist. And the hope is that they will be part of a great display of a future museum there. So there are some of these tridents at a variety of different places. So there's one in Virginia at the entrance to the Terrace Screening Center, which I didn't know we had such a thing, but there's one there. There are 2 inside the National September 11 Memorial. The 2 that we saw in Weehawken, and then 10 were returned to Coatesville. And this is the part that kind of chokes me up. So right outside that area that I just showed you pictures of, there are these tribute plaques. And if you take the time to read it, it talks about how they were brought back to Coatesville and the ceremony that it was. And this all took place in 2010. And so at dawn on April 14th, 2010, a convoy of 28 trucks hit the road, and it was like a parade or a long procession. And there were people all along the route waving flags and to welcome these parts of the World Trade Center back home. Fire companies had flags draped from the ladders, they lined the streets. I mean, it was just, I wasn't around. Again, I was in Michigan, but it was a pretty neat moment. And then this is really the last one that I've officially been to. So I had never been to Flight 93 Memorial. And it seemed wrong since that's only a couple hours away. So I bugged my friend Brian. I said, "Do you want to go to this?" And so he and I went Friday a week ago to visit the Flight 93 Memorial. And it is part of the National Park Service. It's an amazing place. I can tell you that I didn't well, I'll tell you when I get to the visitor center, but here's one of the signs that, they're honoring everyone that was on the flight. Um, and, of the 4 aircraft, this is the only one that did not reach the intended target, which everyone's presuming was the US Capitol. Here's a view from the side of the walls that are at the visitor center looking down over the field. So this is a vast memorial that covers the entire crash site area. So the kind of story behind it is that several passengers and crew members made cell phone calls from the plane, when they knew something was happening. And then from their family, they learned about the attacks at the World Trade Center and at the Pentagon. So the passengers and crew decided to mount an assault, and how they were able to do this is just amazing. I don't know whether the 4 terrorists were in the cabin at this point, but they decided that they were going to try and take control of the aircraft, which obviously they thwarted where it was supposed to go, but it did crash. So it crashed in a field in Stony Creek Township, which is about 150 miles northeast of Washington, D.C. Everyone perished. And what I read at the memorial was that plane crashed at like 568 miles per hour. And so pretty much everything disintegrated. But here's some of the info, where it is. It's in Somerset County. The first phase was completed on September 10th, 2011. And then on June 21st, 2018, wreckage from that was being stored and probably still sifted through, looking for anything that remained, that was transported back in shipping containers to the site. And this is kind of a neat Texas thing. So many cities immediately wanted to memorialize the heroes of Flight 93. And among the first was Marshall, Texas, which named now I say tree, but it's a street. I misspelled that. United Flight 93 in early 2002. So that's pretty cool for you Texas peeps. So, and forgive me, I was still working on this, but I didn't put a picture in here. But I have a ton of pictures of the visitor center. That was officially opened in 2015, and it's situated on the hill that overlooks the crash site and the wall of names, which is down below. And there's a really neat observation platform at the visitor center that aligns with the flight path and Flight 93 thing. So here's the visitor center. And then here's the view looking down on the crash site. In the summer, there are tons of wildflowers planted here. It's just a beautiful natural environment. I really don't know what it looked like before it was regrown and everything after the crash. But here's the walkway that looks out, and it's a direct view of the flight path and down to the crash site. So that's what this long path is. And neat architecturally. So anywhere I can find a puddle, I'm going to try and get a reflection in there. So I was just trying to play around. But the thing about the visitor center was you are not allowed to take any photographs in there. And as much as I wanted to get out my cell phone and snap a couple, I absolutely didn't. I was respectful. I did at the end ask why, and the guard there said that he thought it had to do with like copyright and that, because there's a lot of articles in there. It's an incredible display. Brian and well, we only had a few hours, and I really was in a hurry just to really get pictures to show the whole space. But I knew I wasn't going to be in the frame of mind to read and really study the information. There, you can pick up a phone and listen to the different calls as people called their family. And I wasn't ready for that. So, but I'm going to take my mother back. My mother and father were always very supportive of that. And then I will, listen to everything and read everything and take time to digest it all. But here's the walkway as you enter the visitor center. The visitor center is on the other wall. And it actually has a timeline. If you look at the very bottom of this picture, it's a timeline of the events that happened that day, where the first thing being the first plane that crashed, and then so on. So it's designed to draw the eye skyward, and the opening of the wall frames the airspace over the flight path. So here's the timing of when the flight hit the Pentagon. The Second World Trade Center. And then those walls, it's really neat how they were including natural elements in with this memorial. So the walls just kind of harmonize with the nature. When you can either walk about a mile-long path down to the crash site, or you can drive down the road and get there. Again, for the sake of time, because we visited another memorial before this, we drove down. So when you reach the flight path overlook, the view opens to the crash site. And then where the plane officially crashed, there's a 17-ton boulder marking that off. So here's your view looking out over the field. And down here is where the boulder is for where the official crash site is. But really, you'll see just up there kind of an open field. This used to be a strip mine prior to all of this. And then it was fully filled in, and whatever word I'm looking for, that it was made back safe again. Pay attention to this house up here, because that was a very iconic scene from the plane crash, because the person that lived in that house was one of the first people right there to see it and have pictures of the smoke. And the FBI was at her house within an hour or so, taking the camera, as evidence. And there was so much commotion for this person or this family that they eventually moved from that house. But everything about this is peaceful and reflective. So the walkway eventually widens in from a ceremonial gate. As you drive down, you get different views of the visitor center. Even the bike racks are, commemorative. So here's the view, showing that house and the smoke from there. And the tribute. So just some of the, I won't read them all for the sake of time, but just some of the information from there that they made on these plaques. Oops. some view where they'll have ceremonies every 5 years. I believe they said they have a really neat candle lighting ceremony all along the pathway. If you bring wreaths, you can lay them there. But here is also like the walkway that's supposed to commemorate part of the flight path, I believe, and places to just sit and contemplate. I didn't take a picture of the row of trees. I totally missed doing that, but they planted 40 trees for each of the 40 people on that plane, and it makes a neat walkway. And somehow I missed getting a picture of that, except for these couple. So there's some different information. And then a place where people have left, memorial pins. Here's one from Texas Rangers that was left. So it's kind of neat. So then here's some information about the wall of names that we're coming to, which is right there, the white marble wall. And it has the names of, there's a panel for every single one of the people on the plane. And it looks like one solid wall, but they're all individual panels then that are made to look like one. Looking back from the way you come in. Gate made from some of the trees. So on this day, and I think it was Brian that asked, but there were yellow roses in front of every single one of the name walls. And the park ranger there said he didn't know where they came from, that someone came and laid them the day before, which was really neat. One of the neat things was this little Superman figurine, and that was put there by the brother of Louis Nackey, who was pretty foundational in getting the memorial put together over the years. And his brother was nicknamed Superman, so that's his tribute, which is another thing that just kind of tears you up. And it starts with the captain, and then I believe are alphabetical. Another view of the beautiful walkway to head up. I'd absolutely love to get back there in the summer and see it with all the wildflowers. And then here is the, forget how many ton boulder that kind of symbolizes, or it's not necessarily exactly the crash site, but very close to it. This area you cannot walk out to. It is fenced off, and only the family and the survivors, they're not survivors, but the family can go onto that part. And as we were there, this is not a good picture. I wasn't prepared for it, but a deer came out and was wandering around. So that was kind of neat. So here's some of the different flowers that they'd planted there. So it's absolutely a beautiful must-see memorial. And you pass it when you enter the grounds, but it's kind of the last thing I think that's on the list is the Tower of Voices. And this was added later, several years later, and it's a pretty cool installation. So it's a 93-foot tall monumental tower that they began in 2017. It has 40 wind chimes, one for each passenger who died, none for the terrorist. Good to know. The tower forms the gateway to the National Memorial and is visible from Route 30, which is a main route right outside. It's the largest structure like it ever built, and it's pretty cool. Like the tower supports polished aluminum chimes varying in length from 5 to 10 feet, and they all vary in tones. The pitch of the chimes was engineered by a composer, constructed by a engineering consultant, acoustics manager, and musical instruments fabricator. So a lot went into the sound and the putting together of this memorial. So Tower of Voices, you can drive right up and park in a parking lot right there. Um, so I don't know what the delay was, but they were starting to be put together in 2018, and then the remaining chimes were installed in 2022. So it's only just recent. And it's really beautiful. So took a bunch of shots trying to be creative. The sun was poking through. Get some neat shadows. We went right up underneath it, which is really cool. And then you can kind of see the interior of the structure. I used a fisheye lens inside because it's so big. It was late afternoon when we were there. They close at 5, and we were there till just about 5. Or at least the visitor center closed at 5. You might be able to be in here longer. But I thought the shadows and everything were kind of neat too. And again, there's places for you to sit and just we heard the chimes. It was a pretty still day, but we did have a couple little spots of breeze that you could hear some of the chimes going, which was real pretty. It'd be really neat to hear it, on a windy day. We tried to huff and puff, but we weren't making it flow. And then the very last thing is right near the Flight 93 Memorial. Just looking at Google Maps, I was actually looking for a place to eat when I saw this memorial chapel. And it said that it was open every day. So we decided to stop there first before the official memorial. And it was founded by a priest. Again, ignore that. My apologies. Um, and it opened in 2022, and it's about 12 miles from the visitor center. So it's just this little church. And it was a place where before the official Flight 93 Memorial was built, where people would come and leave wreaths and other memorials. It's constantly manned when it's open by volunteers who just are a wealth of information about the place. This tower has a really neat story that you could look up. It was called the Thunder Tower. The porta potty needs to go, but it's there. So here's the inside, and it's just filled with memorabilia that people have brought. So you can't just leave memorabilia at the Flight 93 Memorial, but people have brought it here. They've left military boots, they've left pins, um, flags, just a ton of different artifacts. So here you can get kind of an idea. And apparently, and this is a view to the back, and then the front. So these quilts, there were 2 on each side. The lady came up to me when I told her that I was from Reading, and she said the Reading Quilting Club made these. I had no idea that Reading has a quilting club, but they're beautiful quilts that are hanging there as a tribute. There's some little souvenirs and things that you can buy. There's a memorial book that tells you, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, all the, tons of the stories behind how this chapel came about, how it became the memorial chapel. This is a piece that was given from the World Trade Center. And then in the back are all these flags, and there's one from every state. And Brian, being the military guy that he is, noticed that a lot of them were dirty. And the lady said that they had a hurricane force storm the day before that knocked all of them over, and people were just scrambling, like driving by and scrambling to stand them back up. But it's another tribute to, um, the people that were killed and the pilots. And it's pretty neat. So we probably spent a good hour or so there. Bunch of little kind of benches with names on. The sun was pretty harsh, so it was hard to get some good detail in some of them. So that's all that I have been to. You can Google, search world tributes or memorials by state. And I think every single state has a memorial or a bunch of memorials in some fashion, whether it's just a plaque, whether it's something bigger. So that would be a neat thing to, kind of look up for your state, or maybe even somewhere that you're traveling to. Information about the teardrop memorials on here. So if anybody's interested, here's some of the things that I had looked at to get some of the information, along with like Wikipedia. So there we go. The end. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Whew, that's emotional. I mean, even in photos. I mean, I've only been just to a few of the memorials, but all of these photos, um, they're moving, and it's this one's hard. This was a hard session for me to sit through. Thank you for doing this for me. I know this isn't this you really didn't get a choice. I did ask politely, but I really wanted to do something tonight to kind of commemorate and not forget. So thank you for sharing all of your wonderful photos. And I know that you ran over to Shanksville to get these photos. So thank you, and thank you, Brian, for tagging along and keeping her out of trouble. And this was such a beautiful collection, very moving. It's you're a perfect tour guide, so I so appreciate that.
Thank you. And I'm thankful that you did this, Linda. And especially like whoever was the Yahoo that decided to have the debate last night, because that's all everybody's talking about today. And that is so disrespectful to this day. And so, that's just kind of infuriating. But so yeah, it's just important to remember and take some time to look things up. We tried to get to the one, except I got COVID. We were heading to the Pentagon too, because there's a neat memorial there. And then I got COVID, and that was the end of that trip. So, but
Well,
yeah,
yeah, I know you'll get there again. So there will be another
we will.
opportunity for you to collect all your photos. All right. Thanks so much, Valerie. Next week, Dan Walters will be here to share his presentation, Dynamic Bird Photography. Until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.